Hello. In this clip from our Justia webinar, AI and Ethics Using Artificial Intelligence Responsibly in Legal Practice, James Gatto discusses the risks of bias, harassment, discrimination, and retaliation while using AI in legal practice. If you'd like to see more Justia videos on law practice and legal marketing, be sure to subscribe to our channel.
Okay, next topic, the prohibition on harassment and discrimination. So the lawyers, cannot engage in harassing or discriminatory activity. Again, that's not anything new. How that relates to AI, this gets a little more complicated in that depending on what information a tool is trained on, there have been a number of situations where AI tools have, not that they've been programmed to do this, but just because of the, maybe the lack of forethought on the training material, they've produced outputs that are discriminatory or harmful to a particular group of people. So it's important to understand that these tools can exhibit bias or other types of harms around that. And that's one of the things that lawyers need to make an attempt to ascertain is there an issue with respect to that with a given tool? And it could be based on, if there's prior stories about the tool producing an output that's a problem. You may want to ask the vendor how they train the tool, how do they ensure there's no bias? At least you do some reasonable diligence in connection with this to make sure that it's been something that's been thought about. There are, I won't get too far down the rabbit trail on this, but there are like best practices that are developing for training of AI tools. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, has published a lot of guidance. One of the things that we typically ask is, and that's kind of considered the gold standard, if you will. We typically we'll ask, vendors, whether it's a tool that we're looking to use, or if I'm representing a client and they're deciding whether to approve a tool under their AA policy, is, what are the protocols you use for ensuring, that you're training on data that's representative in a way that won't create bias or discrimination. If they're not using the NIST guidelines, you may want to dig a little bit deeper. If they are, it doesn't mean that there's not a possibility this will happen, but again, there's a level of reasonableness to the diligence. It's not necessarily that you have to ensure that there's no output, but just that you've taken steps, I think, that are reasonable to ensure that there won't be. And certainly if you become aware that the output in some way is discriminatory or would create harassment or harm against a particular group, you don't want to use it. There have been some tools, this one in particular called Compass, that had been used for a while. It's an AI-based tool that was designed to predict the likelihood of recidivism among criminal defendants. It was later shown that that tool produced a biased result based on the demographics of the typical prison populations. And so that tool, kind of came under fire for those shortcomings. There's other tools that have been used, again, in the criminal context, for what's called predictive policing. These have been tools that have been used, for example, to identify people that may match suspects in certain crimes that have occurred. Some of these have led to a lot of them are based on facial recognition, and some of these have led to false arrests. And part of it is, alleged that the tools weren't designed well because they weren't trained in a way that was on a representative population of faces. It was really more certain demographics of people. If you want more information on this, I strongly encourage you to watch this documentary called Coded Bias. It really does a good job of highlighting how bias can creep into AI with some real world scenarios. Very powerful, very informative, not necessarily ethics based, but it kind of ties into this topic. As I mentioned, NIST, if you want to understand more about the details of kind of the way in which these tools should be trained. The risk management framework from NIST is a good document to take a look at. And again, the California Bar, I think, has pretty clear guidance on this, that they make it clear that, generative AI can be trained on biased information, and that lawyers have an obligation to, kind of ferret that out. And there's kind of an ongoing practices. You need to continue to update your practices. NIST actually just published updated guidance. And so you obviously want to look at the most current guidance to stay informed and do your proper diligence. I think I touched on this earlier, so I'll skip this. This relates to if there's ethical screens using systems like the RAG systems I mentioned, or otherwise you want to make sure that you don't have any, the ability for a generative AI system to give lawyers access to information they shouldn't, even within the same firm. Okay, so moving on from lawyers to courts. So how are courts responding to the use of AI by lawyers? The answer is it kind of varies. Some judges are issuing local rules or specific rules for their court on different aspects or different approaches to AI. Some require certifications that either you're not using AI, or if you're using it, you certify that you've checked for accuracy. In some cases, there's an affirmative obligation to disclose if you've used AI and what portions of the text of a brief or whatever other filing you use to create, that you use the AI tools to create, and certify that you check the output and there's no confidential information or other certifications that may be required. So you can see here, this is not by any means a comprehensive listing. It's just some samples of different ways in which some courts have approached this. Okay. The Fifth Circuit has published proposed amendments to their certificate of compliance. You can see here that whether it's counsel or unrepresented filers, pro se folks, they must certify that there's no Gen AI program used in the drafting of documents, or if it was used, that everything was reviewed, et cetera. So you can see there's kind of similarity across these obligations. The ramifications for any misrepresentation is the court can strike the document and sanction the person who signed it. So obviously you want to avoid that. In a counterpoint, I will say there is a judge, 11th Circuit. There was an opinion, a concurring opinion that was written in a case. There's a link here to the case. It was Judge Newsom, and it was an interesting case. And the long and short of it is the judge wrote about a 30-page concurring opinion, and the vast majority of it was not about the legal issues in the case, but rather Judge Newsom, in connection with this case, used a generative AI tool to assist the judge in coming to the conclusion that the judge came to. It wasn't a dispositive. It didn't. The judge didn't rely on the AI tool for like the ultimate legal answer in the case, but as part of using the tool, the judge gave significant consideration to how judges should think about when and how judges should use AI, if they do, and the circumstances where they should use it. Just to go into this just a little bit more, because it's kind of interesting, and there's they mentions an article here that kind of goes into more detail, but the specific issue that the court relied on this for was to assist it in determining the ordinary meaning of a term that was relevant to the litigation. So this case had to do with a trampoline and someone got hurt. It was an insurance claim, and part of the insurance coverage dealt with whether or not something was an injury, I believe, from landscaping. And the term landscaping wasn't defined in the insurance policy. And so the court turned to the ordinary meaning of landscaping. And it turns out that there is no one single ordinary meaning. And so that was what the court did, was it used generative AI to kind of get a survey of the different ways in which landscaping is defined. And so the court said that, in certain situations, like trying to understand the ordinary meaning of a word, that generative AI tools can be very helpful. But the court, in that concurring opinion, basically laid out some of the, kind of the safeguards that judges should adopt if they do decide to use generative AI to assist. So it's a very, I think, in my opinion, very well written piece, concurring opinion that kind of covers these issues from a judge's perspective, and I encourage you to read it, or at least the article that's linked here that discloses it. Okay, unauthorized practice of law. So, of course, the unauthorized practice of law is illegal in most states. And what's interesting is that despite the fact that the legal profession is hundreds of years old, what constitutes a practice of law varies by state. There's not a single uniform definition. And so it varies by state. And so why is that relevant here? There are some AI tools that purport to actually give legal advice, and doing so in most states will be illegal. So giving legal advice typically means representing clients, providing legal answers, preparing legal documents. Those are the types of things that constitute legal advice. In contrast, there's many tools that provide legal information. So if you do a search of cases and you come back with a list of cases, that's not legal advice, that's legal information. Then the lawyer would typically review those cases and determine, what's the legal answer to whatever question they're trying to answer based on the precedent. Okay, so that should be pretty clear. But there's a number of tools, I'll cover some in a second, that have actually kind of either come up to or crossed the line of unauthorized practice of law. And it's important, in at least one case, a lawyer was involved in the company, and in a way where there was allegations that the lawyer was assisting in the unauthorized practice of law by being in that role. So what are some of these cases? What are some of these tools? So there's a tool that is called Do Not Pay, and it started out as so-called robot lawyer application. And what the tool was designed to do was to be like a real-time, it would listen to court proceedings in traffic cases, and there'd be an earpiece in the lawyer's ear, or not the lawyer's ear, but the person who was appearing in court, who got the ticket representing themselves. It would basically, in real time, tell you what to say. Now, in some cases, you can't bring in electronics. That may have been a violation there. But beyond that, this tool was providing real-time legal arguments. And of course, it got shut down pretty quickly as for that functionality as being the unauthorized practice of the law. One of the things to be careful about is AI legal chatbots. So chatbots, as many of you may be aware, are tools that you'll find in some websites where some companies use it as a way to engage with customers in the non-legal context, where you can type in information and it will gather the information and try to provide a responsive answer to a client with a customer without having them have to wait on a line, a phone call, or something like that. So if a chatbot is used by law firms or in connection with being able to process legal information, you need to be really careful about that. You want to ensure that the chatbot is not giving legal advice, and you want to really be careful about it even giving legal information. So that's an area to be, kind of very mindful of. One of the other kind of big areas, and I won't go into this in great detail, but if it's something that, you need more on, there are a number of existing cases on this. There's a difference in some cases between, having a tool that assists in filling out legal forms, and and in contrast, deciding what forms might be relevant in a particular case. That might actually involve providing legal advice. And again, this varies by state. There's been a series of cases involving LegalZoom and a company called Upsolve, where there's been some, I'd say, conflicting results. But to the extent that you use AI in connection with assisting in filling out forms, I would kind of be mindful of these cases, and depending on which state you're in, decide what is permissible and what's not. In any case, if you use an AI tool to fill out a form or for other purposes, absolutely 100% you need to confirm the factual information that was filled out correctly, if it's permitted to use AI even in that context. Okay. So, they mentioned if lawyers are involved with some of these tools, there was one tool, for example, that in trying to get around the unauthorized practice of law, a client would pay to have forms filled out by an AI tool, and those tools would be sent to a lawyer to review. Turns out in many cases there was a very cursory review, and in very, very few cases did the lawyer make any changes, and there was questions as to whether that really got around the unauthorized practice of law in those cases. So if you're involved as an in-house counsel in these cases, I'd really be careful about these issues and really take a look at your state, what the prior cases are, if there's been any in your state, and what the rules are in those cases. There are certain tools that are general purpose AI tools that their terms of service prohibit usage for legal purposes, except by a practicing attorney. So, even some of these tools recognize that there's legal limitations. There's another tool that's interesting, and to my knowledge, this is still kind of an unresolved issue, but there's a tool called ClaimCam that uses AI to identify potential class members in class action lawsuits in exchange for a percentage. And this tool has been used in a couple of big cases that are kind of referenced here. And there were allegations that they're interfering with the settlement administration, and that taking a legal fee for identifying class members was improper. So I think that one is still ongoing, but another way in which AI is being used that may create some potential issues. Beyond the bar associations, the FTC has issued a warning that the use of legal tech that constitutes unauthorized practice of law may also violate the FTC consumer marketing requirements, particularly if there's any inaccurate information or misleading advice that's provided by these tools. There's a link there to the FTC opinion letter on the unauthorized practice of law.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next clip.